Awesome. Thank you. All right. First and foremost, reviewing the Kentucky game. Very disappointed in our performance as a coaching staff and as a team. It was below our standard, and to play below your standard against a very good team is usually not a very good recipe. And even with all that being said, with 8 minutes left in the game, it was still 14-7. Thought the defense did a good job keeping us in it. Offensively, we just weren't able to, mount a scoring drive and put anything together. So ultimately, I'm going to point a thumb at myself first and not make any excuses. I'm accountable for every facet of this football program and assume full responsibility for a loss, and that's on me, and we're going to get it right. Some disappointing aspects to the game, obviously, as everybody saw, the penalties, 16 total, 9 on offense, 6 on defense, and 2 on special teams, which included a bunch of false starts. And, we did work on crowd noise the entire weekend, our silent count. And I think as that number 41 started getting a pass rush and our guys started getting a little anxious, we started getting out of our stance a little bit early there. And then certainly the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, which are unacceptable. And I think we went into that game and played with a tremendous amount of emotion, but became too emotional. And I think we turned it into a bunch of individual battles as opposed to playing as a team and concentrating on our assignment and our fundamentals and technique. And discussing it with the team and the staff yesterday, we're going to put an end to these unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Got it cleaned up from game 2 to game 3. Had a slip up here, and any unsportsmanlike conduct penalty now, I'm going to pull the guy out of the game. He'll stand next to me, and he'll go back in when I tell him to go back in. So one way to catch their attention is to take away their playing time. So we're going to get that right as well. The run game, 229 yards to 56, is not up to our standard from a physicality standpoint. And then certainly with the sacks and the pressures, that number 41, rated the number 1 ranked outside linebacker in the upcoming draft for a reason. So he did a very good job there, and weren't able to neutralize him. The 2 biggest determining factors in the outcome of the game, turnover margin, explosive plays. We were 1-1 on turnovers. Brian Cole had an excellent interception, but unfortunately we turned one back over that led to a score for them. And then explosive plays, and this was probably the most disappointing aspect for me from an offensive standpoint, that after 3 successive weeks of having 20 or more or right in that range, we were limited to 3, 2 passes and 1 run, and then we gave up 10 explosive plays. By our parameters on defense, 8 runs and 2 passes. I think we showed flashes. I don't think we were nearly consistent enough. We were behind the sticks a lot offensively because of penalties, and as a play caller, it's hard to get into a flow of a game in that regard. And certainly, credit to Coach Stoops and his staff for an overall game plan and a defensive game plan. But as myself and our coaches, our job is to make sure that during the week with our game plan and with our play calls that we're putting the kids in position to be successful. And as the players, their responsibility is to make sure they're practicing that plan, and when we make the right calls, that they're executing them. So we're all in it together. We win as a team, we lose as a team, but ultimately, those 2 things that combine, the coaches putting the plan together and making good calls, and when given an opportunity, the players executing it. That's what we need to do moving forward. And kind of putting closure to the game, as we said to the team yesterday, we were going to watch the film, we were going to learn from the film, and we were going to forget about the film, all right? And then we're going to turn the page and move on to Florida. Need to be able to handle, as we mentioned throughout camp and throughout the beginning of the season, need to be able to handle prosperity, which we've done very well in our 3 wins. Need to handle adversity, which now we're forced to confront with this 1 loss. And we can't let the same game beat us twice. So we can't let the ramifications or collateral damage of this Kentucky game affect us in the Florida game. We're moving forward. As I told the team, all the goals that we want to accomplish for this season are still in front of us. And I mentioned to them my first year at Penn State in 2016, where we started off the season 1-2, beat Kent to open the season, lost to Pitt at Pitt on a last-second interception, 42-39. Very heartbreaking loss against a rival, and then proceeded to go up to Ann Arbor and get shellacked by Michigan 49-10. And it was kind of a very humbling experience. And we kind of rallied everything together and came back in the next game, beat Minnesota in overtime, and continued to run the table and win the Big Ten championship and play in the Rose Bowl. So certainly everything that we want to accomplish is in front of us, and to have the type of success we need moving forward is not without precedent. And ultimately, the best way for us to predict our future is to create it, okay? And we believe in that. And last thing as it pertains to this game, that ultimately I'm single-handedly responsible for elevating the expectation level amongst our players, amongst our program, and amongst our fans by using the term championship standard. And I'm fine with that. And I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to backtrack. And I'm not going to waffle for 1 second or 1 minute. I know realistically it wasn't going to happen overnight, but our coaching staff didn't become dumb overnight, and our players didn't become bad overnight. This is the same team that won the first 3 games and went on the road to beat a Kansas State team in a Power 5 non-conference game that hadn't happened in over 30 years. So, one loss won't define this season, and one loss won't define this team. And I promise you this, we're working tirelessly, and we're going to get this friggin' thing right. So hopefully everyone understands that the standard is the standard. We're not going to change anything in our approach, and one game is not going to define this damn team, and we're going to get this thing back right. All right, there are no players of the week or scouts of the week or helmet stickers, Brett, when we lose a game. All right, student athletes of the week are Jesse Jackson and Fletcher Adams. Okay, injuries this week, Justin Johnson has a lower body, and he's day-to-day. Jamal Peters has a lower body, and he's still out indefinitely. Shamar Kilby-Lane has an upper body, and he's day-to-day. Tyler Williams has a lower body, and he's day-to-day. Excuse me. And Marquise Spencer has kind of had a nagging upper body injury that we decided to go on ahead, and we're going to get surgery on that. Now he's going to miss the rest of the season with that, so Marquise is going to be out with that. So those are our injuries. Okay. Moving forward to Florida, obviously, a lot of this probably does not need a review. The head coach is Dan Mullen, has had a tremendous amount of success as a coordinator at Bowling Green in Utah and Florida, and obviously a tremendous stint as the head coach here at Mississippi State. Florida's 3-1 this year, coming off of a great win against Tennessee, where they had created 6 turnovers and scored over 40 points. And go into the offense. Billy Gonzalez and Coach Hevesy are the co-coordinators. They're a spread team. They run 11 and 12 personnel, inside zone counter, try to stretch the field horizontally and vertically, averaging 41 a game and showing great balance around 200 rushing and 200 passing per game. Felipe Franks is off to a good start. He's thrown for 12 touchdowns so far this year. The wide receivers, Van Jefferson and Freddie Swain, are their kind of go-to guys. And then Jordan Scarlett, the running back, Lusa breaks tackles, has a very good burst. Defensively, the coordinator's Todd Grantham. They play a multiple 3-down front, get into some 4-down and 3-down looks, play some match and quarters coverage, do a real good job on the back end. And when they get you into 3rd down, have a very exotic and extensive blitz package. They're number 1 nationally in takeaways with 14. As we mentioned, they had 6 in the last game. Number 9th in the country in pass defense and 12 in red zone defense. Their top players are number 92, Jabari Zabiga, very aggressive playmaker off the edge, 5 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks. Chauncey Gardner's an all-SEC player, very good blitzer. And then C.J. Henderson, the corner, number 5, physical, 2 forced fumbles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. Special teams-wise, the coordinator's Coach Knox, very fast and physical, highly productive unit. Number 1 in the SEC in kickoff coverage and punt return. They block 2 punts and have 1 punt return for a touchdown. So certainly in that hidden yardage battle, they do a very good job there. Freddie Swain, the receiver, is the punt returner, averaging 24 return with a touchdown. And then the punter, Tommy Townsend, net of 41 yards, 6 inside the 20, 60% fair catches, and a very accurate punter. All right. Our keys to victory for this week is that our approach is going to remain consistent. It's going to be through our preparation, our effort, our execution, our ability to successfully eliminate distractions and play a full 60 minutes, 1 rep at a time at a championship standard, and understanding there will be a certain emotional component attached to this game, and for our kids to understand that that's going to be part of it, but still not allow that to, as I mentioned, to distract them, and make sure we have a great week of preparation. All right, with that, any questions?
Looking at the film against Kentucky with what Josh Allen was able to do, and obviously he's a special talent, but what do you see moving forward with that issue with offensive tackles, maybe getting them some help, or is that something that just depends on a game-by-game situation?
Yeah, we had a plan to chip him with the running backs, and utilize some more, the thing moving forward, utilize quick game, utilize screens, utilize draws, which were all in the game plan, but you can't double team the boundary end when they're bringing an overload pressure to the field. So that becomes an issue when you're trying to get an extra hat on him when they're bringing. And they, like I said, they did a good job with the scheme trying to find a way to get him singled up. And looking at the film, we made some corrections that we'll have to address that moving forward. But you hear a term, don't let the game records wreck the game. And, the kid, to his credit, played a very good game, and we got to do better. I've got to do better.
You mentioned the emotional balance of this, obviously being an emotional game, but emotions being an issue last week. What's kind of the balance y'all strike there, playing with that edge but not letting yourself go over that line?
Yeah. Showing emotions without being emotional. I think you can compete hard. I think you can exert maximum effort and do the things that are necessary to be successful on every play without losing your head and being hot-tempered. And there's a difference between playing hard and picking up the ball and throwing it at somebody, or playing hard and pushing somebody after the snap. That's not toughness. That isn't. That's extra, and it's unnecessary and it's unacceptable. And you're not going to see that moving forward.
Kind of going off of that, you mentioned the Kentucky game being an emotional game. Obviously, this one could be an emotional game for obvious reasons. How are you guys going to attack the need to do everything that you just said, not play too emotional?
Yeah, well, we talked about it a little bit at our meeting yesterday and after practice, that ultimately the emotional component that's going to be attached to this game, is relative to Coach Mullen and his staff being with these guys for an extended period of time. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not going to be on the field taking any snaps, and neither is any of our assistants, and neither are any of their coaches. They're not going to play the game. The game is going to be played on the field between the white lines, between 11 Mississippi State players and 11 Florida players, and that's how it's going to be. So, I mean, it's to me probably a little bit. I don't think you can discount the emotional part of it, but you have to manage that, and people use different things for motivation, and that's not for me to tell them what to use for their individual motivation. But I know it's not going to have a bearing or a factor in the outcome of the game once the ball gets kicked off.
Joe, you were on kind of the good end of a coach knowing about another team with Hudspeth in Louisiana, and now sort of the other way around. Does that factor into your game plan? Do you worry how much Mullen knows about your personnel, or is that something you just have to make your game plan and go with it?
No, I think that's definitely a part of it, and hopefully we know as much about our personnel as they know about our personnel, and like anything, you got to maximize the strengths, minimize the weaknesses, and obviously them being around these guys for some 4 years, some 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, they'll have a very specific knowledge of what our players can do and can't do.
With the offensive tackles and all the false starts, was it a communication issue when you talked to Coach Johnson in those tackles, or was it the crowd noise? What seemed to be the problem?
I don't think it was as much as a communication, because we were going off of a silent count and a clap, so we were going off of an audible count, I guess, so to speak. But I think more than anything, it was those guys leaning, anticipating the rush and want to make sure that they weren't getting beat fast around the edge. So I think it was more than that, and it wasn't that they couldn't hear. I think they were just getting a little bit antsy in their stance.
Coach, commitment to the running game, that's kind of been a staple through the first 3 weeks, and last week, not so many running plays. You mentioned in the postgame there's a lot of checks that Nick made there. Is there a situation where you just say, hey, run what we want to run right here without checking regardless of the numbers?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily checks as much as, the decision of whether the ball gets handed off or thrown based on what the look is. There are some plays that we have where we just call it and hand the ball off, but unfortunately you don't want to do that when there's more people at the line of scrimmage than you can block, and that's kind of part of the thing of running a read offense. And I think as much as Kentucky's ability to stop the run and be successful doing that was based on scheme, a lot of it was we were out of rhythm and behind the sticks. So when you're second and long and third and long and trying to get that back to a manageable down and distance, and they're doing a good job stopping the run, that throws you off a rhythm a little bit. So I think it's probably a combination of both things. But to answer your question, yes, there are plays in our playbook where you call a run and hand it off.
Coach,
Read.
Back here, Coach. Can you talk about Osiris Mitchell's emergence in your receiving corps and what you like about him?
A lot of size, a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism. Did a great job, catching the ball and getting some yards after the catch. I think it provides a good horizontal threat. And he can blow the top off the coverage, and he does a good job in the intermediate stuff as well. So, his emergence, Stephen Guidry, the slot guys playing well. We need to continue to have our receiving core develop to help us in this stretch run in the SEC.
Since taking the job back in November, just how much communication have you had with Coach Mullen and back and forth?
I've talked to him at the times when the SEC meetings I've talked to him.
There was some concern nationally that because of the new redshirt rule, that after 4 games it would kind of create sort of a free agency thing, where guys didn't like the role or something like that and they might transfer. Have you had to deal with that at all? Has there been any massaging of egos? Is anyone leaving the program, or has that kind of been a non-issue here?
Well, I think everyone's aware that Jamal Couch decided to transfer. I think that's been discussed already. But I think that's just part of the landscape now, that you create a role and it's positive on one end. It allows some of your true freshmen to gain game experience without exhausting a year of eligibility, but it opens up another window where returning players who may or may not have used their red shirt have red shirts or eligibility remaining after 4 games where they don't like or they're not happy with their role on the team. So in terms of it being a trend, or I'm not sure what it is across the national landscape, but that's one thing probably after a year or so we'll look back and say, is there a better way that we could have done this rule?
With Jamal being out indefinitely, is Chris Rayford still a full-time corner?
Yes, sir.
And did y'all send any plays from the Kentucky game to the SEC from an officiating standpoint to be reviewed?
Yeah.
Can you say which ones?
But we get the response back on Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah. We do, and that's a weekly thing. I mean, that's done by every program in the country on a weekly basis.
Coach, you mentioned letting the players know a new level of accountability with unsportsmanlike conduct. What would you say their response was yesterday in the team meeting, coming off the loss and with the new accountability?
I mean, to be honest with you, Jeffrey and Gary Green called a players-only meeting with just the team to address those 2 things before we had a chance as a coaching staff, and I thought that was great. So it's not like we have an ostrich defense here and we're sticking our head in the sand and saying it doesn't exist. And I think that's a fine line with a very competitive, emotional team, of striking the balance between competitiveness between the whistles and unnecessary stuff after it. And that's you can get them up, you can make them run, you can do all those things. But the thing that I found is most effective is taking away playing time. So they're going to do it. They're going to be held accountable. They'll stand on the sideline, and when I feel it's time for them to go back and, well, hopefully first and foremost we don't see any more of it. But if we do, they'll have a view of the game from the sideline.
Obviously, it's still early in the week, but did you notice yesterday any behavioral changes or emotional differences in the players given who they're playing this week? And if you do find that they're acting a little bit differently this week, what's going to be your message to try to get them to focus?
No, I honestly, we were a little bit sullen in the team meeting, and to me that's anticipated, and it's different than what we've had the first 3 weeks. And I don't want us to ride an emotional roller coaster and be high or too low, but I certainly don't want us in there doing backflips after a loss. So, but like I said, after we watched the film and made the corrections on the field and moved ahead to Florida stuff, I think the kids were very focused, and I think they're excited for this opportunity.